We're rolling. All right. Welcome to Lee Circle. We're still Lee Circle, in our opinion. They haven't renamed it. I'm with my classmate.
God bless you, Charlie. Let's fight the good fight. Lee Circle.
I'm with my classmate from 1978. Thomas Bruno is one of the best sculptors. He's had a great career in New Orleans, and it's great to be working with him. Thomas, this is coming together. This is week 5?
Week 5, and what I did mostly today was really kind of work on the gesture. What I mean by the gesture is the way that we stand, the way that we communicate with our body. This is absolutely tantamount important to a successful piece of sculpture, because it's in the gesture that we really read the humanity of the piece of art. So what I wanted to do was make sure that what Robert E. Lee is doing here is faithful to what Alexander Doyle did up there. I don't want to simply have Robert E. Lee standing in a natural posture. What I want to have him do is standing the way Alexander Doyle had him stand when he did the sculpture.
Alexander Doyle, out of New York?
Yes, that's right.
He was one of the best guys ever.
Fabulous sculptor. He came down to New Orleans. New Orleans invited him to come down here and do this piece of sculpture. Wow, what an honor, right, to have such a great sculptor come down here. And of course, the question is, will a Yankee coming down here to do a southern piece of sculpture of Robert E. Lee? Of course, I don't think it would have the same kind of emotional baggage nowadays that it had back then, because obviously the war was over and really they had buried the hatchet in many ways.
So this was for the opening, right before the opening of the World's Fair of 1884.
Yes, that's right.
But Doyle, a bronze, to make a bronze that big, I mean, you got what?
It was. Let's mention this. It's 16 feet tall.
Yes,
that's huge. So you can just imagine, average person is 6 feet, right? And that's 16.
3 of them, really.
That's a lot of bronze. That is a huge. And when you increase the size of an individual, for example, when you go from 6 feet tall to 7 feet tall, you're not just going taller. You're going larger in every direction. So the massiness of the sculpture becomes much greater with only a foot more of stature to the sculpture.
Now, I've watched your work because the poise, he likes the pose.
Yes.
It means so much because that's how people feel.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and
again, that gesture that the artist sees us on, this is such a subtle but absolutely essential aspect of making sculpture, because it's that connection to the humanity. Remember, this is a piece of clay, then it's a piece of bronze. It's inert, it's inorganic. It has nothing to do with humanity. So what the sculptor has to do is create the illusion of humanity in human material. So that gesture is that kind of flashpoint of connection between the viewer and the inert material.
And here, Lee, I think he was head of 2 universities, really, West Point
and
Washington and
Lee. That's Washington Lee.
He's a general. He was a colonel. He was in charge of Texas. I mean, he actually was a Corps of Engineers. He was in charge of fixing St. Louis. So is this pose to show him as authoritarian, or what do we get out of this? When we look at Lee, what do you think they're trying to say?
I think that
the arms folded.
Arms folded. What the gesture creates is this very powerful monolithic statement. And what I mean by monolithic is this idea of this kind of an undivided mind. For example, a piece of sculpture or a gesture can express a certain degree of uncertainty, right? I could be reflective, I could be questioning, I could be searching. Every single way in which I position my head, my shoulders, my hands can suggest a different mental state. And so the question then becomes, what mental state is Robert E. Lee in right now in this gesture? And I think the answer is one of determination, of insistence, of this sense of self-control, of self-governance.
But when I think of Lee, because of all the students that Lee had, I'm thinking that maybe that was one reason to have this, because not only did he have all the troops to command, but his post-life was almost the first think tank. He was trying to solve how the country comes together, and it seemed like he set policies for how people, whether they be at West Point or Washington and Lee, what is being a Southern gentleman, or what is being a gentleman, period.
Right. I think that's a very interesting point, but I really don't think that's what the sculpture is mainly focusing on. I think it's more of a sculpture about his relationship with the average man.
Yeah.
I don't think this is so much a Brahmin reflecting on the heavy issues of the time.
Okay.
I don't think that that's what they were after. I think what they were more after was this sense of leadership, that we can look to this man and know when the bullets start flying that he's not going to run hightail. He is going to be set and determined, assured in his sense of his own position, his own sense of his own rightness, determination to see it through. So this is a common man sculpture. This is a piece of sculpture where a soldier can look up at this general and say, my general knows what he's about, and he's going to see this through, and he's going to be faithful to me and faithful to the cause to the very end. So I think that's what was being articulated here. This was not a sculpture about oppression. It was not a sculpture about we're conquering someone else.
No, I mean, but like...
And understand, it's very important because that's what the city claims it is.
Oh, yeah, but
it's a sculpture, they're claiming it's a sculpture about dominating someone else.
Right, true.
Now, let me bring you back to a sculpture that does do that. The famous Perseus, who's holding the head of the Medusa.
Yes.
Okay? That's in the square at the Piazza in Florence. This is a sculpture about conquering. I have the head of my enemy. I have my foot on his body, and he's headless. I have just destroyed my enemy. I am now the conqueror. I own the trophies of the conqueror. This man is not a conqueror. What this man is, a bulwark of determination, of being able to stand against maybe unbelievable forces which outnumber him and outpower him. But he is not going to give up simply because he's in a situation where he's probably going to be overwhelmed.
Sure.
This is a man who's going to stay firm in his values. Again, that's a common man's meat and potatoes type of sculpture. It's a sculpture that says, I'm with you, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying right where I am. Of course, bitingly ironic, right? Because he is no longer right where he is. But you've got to understand that within the hearts and minds of these soldiers who paid for this statue and had it erected, that never would go away. And if these soldiers were to come back to this circle right now and see that sculpture removed, Robert E. Lee would still be there.
Well,
Robert E. Lee would exist in their hearts.
I think it was more so we see this mound. I think when I see a mound, I think a burial mound, an Indian burial
Absolutely.
mound. So I think
Absolutely.
of the 11,500 people that did not return, that their widows and orphans contributed to this as well. So I think it's more than Lee. I think it's really Lee's army. And what's oddly enough, you've been working on Saturdays,
yes,
all through football season.
Yes, indeed.
And tonight you got the LSU Lee's Tigers.
That's
they
right.
Play football. So they play football. So the whole deal is, it's more about, really, to me, the 11,000 men that looked up to this guy that didn't come home.
That's
as
right.
a way of remembering that they were pitching in to have some type of memorial to their husbands and fathers.
I mean, God bless you, Charlie. That's exactly correct. That is absolutely the heart of all of this. Because what you have to remember is that the losses were catastrophic on the North and the South.
Yes.
When they commemorated this statue, they weren't just Southerners here. They invited folks from the North to come here and to celebrate with them. Because what these folks understood, North and South, was that the sacrifice was a national sacrifice. And that the soldiers that died on the field were not just our soldiers. The soldiers were all of our soldiers.
To that point, I would say we were probably, as a country, closer right after the war.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
if you look, there was this tremendous sense of, let me tell you, there were reunions at the turn of the century.
Yes,
there were these tremendous reunions.
The reunions started in 1867.
Of course. And when we mean reunions, understand, we need to express this to folks, that the reunions were not just Confederate soldiers getting together with Confederate soldiers. These were soldiers getting together with soldiers. The Union soldiers and the Confederate soldiers get together, and they would celebrate together.
Yeah, I actually, on the way to Vicksburg, there's a gentleman's house that the Union Army occupied.
Yes.
And he invited him back there every year.
Absolutely.
And then he started sending magnolias, and this went on for like 30 years till most of them died off. Chalmette Battlefield has 6,000 Union soldiers that the daughters of the Confederacy put flowers on their graves and tended to.
Look,
it's amazing how both sides took care of each other's dead, because people didn't come back from the North, people didn't come back from the South.
Let me tell you what, this was a lover's spat.
Yeah,
this battle between the states was a lover's spat. Unfortunately, it ended up very badly.
Yes.
It was very ugly. And there was a lot of hard feelings in the North and the South. But, like I said, for the soldiers, for the ones who fought in the fields, who gave their limbs, who gave their lives, they understood the humanity in all of this. And so I think when I look at this sculpture, what I'm reminded of is a father figure who loved his children, who loved the nation that he fought for. These soldiers looked up to this man as a father who cared for them and nurtured for them. And I think this is what, when I look at this, I do not see a man who's necessarily thinking about the deep issues of the time, or in ruminating over the losses, or celebrating the victories, but simply expressing that absolute devotion and connection he had with his troops.
And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. And the funny part is going back to the Louisiana Tigers, they were rebel rousers. And he actually disciplined them pretty harshly at times.
Oh, I bet he did.
You know, so that look, I'm looking at that look, that's almost the look of your dad when you're coming home
exactly.
late.
Son, son, where have you been all evening? I mean, look, what we have is a very, very father-oriented culture. It's a very patriarchal culture. God bless him. We need more of that. And what I want to say is that in this patriarchal culture, it was the best part of the father. It was the father that loved his children and that would sacrifice everything, even his life, for the sake of the betterment of his children. And that's what we have here in this sculpture. We have a father figure who gave it all up, because he could have been the leader of the Potomac. He could have been president of the United States, folks. And that's not a stretch. I'm telling you, had he led the Army of the Potomac instead of leading the Confederate forces, he could have been president. And he could have enjoyed tremendous wealth because of that position. But he turned his back on all of that because he believed in his family, he believed in his traditions, and he sacrificed the great sacrifice for him.
Tommy, thanks.
Right,
see you in a week.
Okay.
Awesome job you're doing. Lee's really coming together.
We're going to get Lee into shape.
By Christmas?
Oh, yeah, definitely before Christmas. We should be working on Beauregard pretty soon. What I did today was a very important day because he kind of nailed down that gesture. Now I can go in and kind of really refine him out and get him done.
All right. Hey, thank you, guys. We'll see you in a week.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's a great image.
I didn't want to.
That's